A church that does not pray is a church that does not talk to God. And a church that does not talk to God finds itself in a dilemma, because if we are the church of God and we're not talking to God, the question comes, who are we talking to? If we're not talking to God. Now, we can suggest a number of definitions for prayer, and many of you have those. Many of them are just very easy. Prayer is communication. Prayer is the sincere heart of the person. Prayer is making your petition known. Either one of those is workable. It's not like your definition has to fit my definition for it to be right. Sometimes we find definitions in our prayer time. When you spend time in prayer, God speaks to your spirit, and you have a conviction about the definition of what you believe prayer to be. We simply suggest and offer, don't make your definition the only definition for what prayer is. Don't make yours. It's wonderful that you had or have had an experience that suggests to you this is what prayer is. But since I'm not you, and I have not had your experience or been where you have been, I cannot always relate to your definition. That's why God, through the pages of the Old Testament, revealed himself by experience, so that each one knew God differently, but they knew him by a particular experience. Abraham gets to know him as Jireh, a provider. Abraham needed a ram in the wilderness. And so God provided, and that gave Abraham the identity. But there are others that didn't need that type of miracle. Our own Pastor Fred Powell was remodeling the church that they're in now. And he said one day he was praying and he was saying, God, I need a miracle to have known what the building looked like. And he was saying, you parted the waters for Moses, and you did this, and you did that. I need a miracle like Moses, and I need a miracle like David, and he said, the Lord spoke to him and said, you're not David. You don't need a David miracle. You need a miracle for you. He needed a Fred Powell miracle. Look at your neighbor, and if you know their name, call their name out and say, you need a. See, sometimes we hear other people's testimony and we like the sound of the testimony and it's inspirational, and we want God to move for us the way he moved for them, but you're not them. And a lot of time is lost, and I don't mean prayer is lost time, but you're praying and anticipating a move for God. Not he cannot do, but it's not according to God's purpose that he's going to do it. God sees you according to his purpose, not according to your perfection. We have this mentality of striving for. And yet God knows you in spite of. And it's interesting that, here's my lesson right here. It's interesting that when Israel says to the prophet, give us a king like all the other nations, that God is the one who chooses Saul. So we talk about King Saul, but God was the one that said, go out there and you'll find this Benjamin. You'll find him plowing. That's the one. Isn't it interesting that God chose this carnal man to lead this spiritual people? But since you ask me out of your flesh, I'm going to respond to you to your flesh. Sometimes what we ask God for in prayer, God responds to your want and not your need. Hebrews, I believe it is, says you have need of patience. For after you've done, after you've done the will. But what you need is patience. So the reason I haven't responded is because I have not developed the patience so that patience would have her perfect work. But you keep asking me for what you want, and I'm trying to do for you what you need. So since you're not patient for what you need, I'm going to give you what you want. Isn't it something we get what we want and then realize we don't want it? You wanted Bojangles and found out he was Bozo? And so, prayer then must be developed on an individual basis. Collectively, we come together to pray. Respectfully, there is a prayer leader. Now, when there is a prayer leader, because we come together collectively, it is impossible for the prayer leader to pray everything I need. But it is out of order to overpray the prayer leader. You don't have a leader and then get in front of the leader. If you have a leader, they are positioned to lead.